Welcome to RMM Help. In this video we provide an overview of the stock control system in RMM. We operate the stock system within RMM to enable identification of the parts that we use in maintenance, and that enables a cost of materials to be calculated as part of our overall job cost. We can also calculate a value of the total stock that we have held at any time, and RMM uses the FIFO valuation method, and there's a separate help video available describing that. All of our supporting files are here in administration, and in the code files, control file, defaults to tab, we have an option to be able to print a label to affix onto our bins or locations for stock identification, and that can get printed optionally during the receipt process. We also have some stock code files. This is stock groups to enable us to identify our stock by major groupings, so we might want to have the ability to report on electrical stock or medical electronics. We have stock locations, and these are all user definable, and our locations could be a geographical location, so this one we've called a geographical workshop stores, or we could have a simple main stores, or we could have specialist stores, specialist equipment, medical electronics or electrical stores. Finally, we have the concept of a VAT file. But if you don't generate invoices for your completed work, or you don't use RMM purchase order processing, then you won't be using those codes. Just before we go back to the stock system, you will also, when setting up your stock items, be able to classify the supplier, and that those details are held in the normal name and address file. And we also utilize account codes, cost centers, so that for budgetary purposes we can allocate the cost of materials to whatever account codes we've got set up. So we might have one for mechanical and engineering, or one for medical equipment, and that will then add that cost if we were reporting at cost center level. The stock system is available from the main menu, and when we open that, we've got a conventional data list. But before we move on, there's a couple of fields that I'd like to mention to you. First of all, this product ID. Now, that product ID is a system generated field. It's not editable. When we look in stock detail, that's grayed out, and that's used by RMM support staff during a support call. And this stock item, the type here, we've got stock items. These are the regularly used stock items that we use daily. We keep a stock of them, and they're used in our stock valuations. We have two others. One's called non-stock, and the other's called service items. They're not included in our stock valuations, but because we might use them regularly, we might want to have a product code and description. We might want to keep details of the supplier, and what that will do when we select it from a list, it will improve our accuracy and speed up data input during our feedback. Just before we look at a stock detail form, you'll notice that we've got some color coding. We've got red, and the red items signify that our stock level is 0. So I've highlighted those two records. There's the first one at 0, and there's the second one at 0. And that's to help us with our stock replenishment and reordering. And we also have two items here that are colored in orange, and they are to show us that our stock level is equal to or less than our minimum stock level. So you can see in this instance our stock level, minimum stock level is 5, and our actual stock level is 5. So that's why it's coloured yellow, orange. And in this one we've got a stock level of 3, a minimum stock level of 3, and our actual stock level is 1. And as we see when we look in a stock detail form, that is the total stock between all locations. Let's have a look at the stock detail form. This is a regular tabbed form, and we'll look at these tabs shortly. The top part of the form here is our static stock information. There's our product ID, non-editable, and that's why it's grayed out. Our user-definable alphanumeric product code and a product description, and that can be as intuitive as you want it to be, and our supplier and the supplier's item reference. The supplier's item reference and our product code could be the same. And then here we've got our stock level. So our stock level is 11, and I mentioned before that that's the total stock level. And if I look in locations, you can see that we've got 2 locations with that stock item in. Our main stores has got 6, and our medical electronic stores has got 5. You'll also notice that we've got a bin location. That's user definable, alphanumeric, and that gets displayed when we're running our reports. Down here we have our purchase price, so that's the cost price of our items. So every time we receive goods, a goods received note comes in, we will update this value with the unit cost, and it's that value that's used in our stock valuation. The selling price, this is the price that gets used on our feedback of parts to get our overall job cost. In the final tab, transactions, we've got a transaction type, and I'll mention a little bit about that now, but we'll look at it when we get back onto the main stock detail, stock listing. All of the movements of stock coming in and out of ResMan stock are known as transactions, and there's separate help videos on each of those different transaction types. So in here we've got an adjustment, that was our opening balance. We've issued stock there to a job, and our reference there automatically shows the job number for issuing to jobs, and we can append onto it user definable reference. And then we had our stock transfer between our 2 stores locations. So there are stock transactions. Those items there will net down to the same value as we have here. And then if I go back onto our stock listing, we've now got 2 transaction options. The first one is batch transactions, and all of our transactions are entered through batches. And when we create a batch, the system gives it a unique number, a sequential number. It shows the date, and we select from a drop-down list our batch type. So in this one instance we've got issue job, returns, receipts, an issue from a requisition, an adjustment, and it shows you how many items there are in it. Now when we create these batches, we can have as many records as we want. So this is a return. We might want to do returns for more than one item or a supplier, and you can just keep on adding on to that using this edit button and adding more transactions. If I go back onto our list, we have the concept of posted batches. Now posting is the process of updating the stock records with whatever the transaction is. So when I click on this show and hide button, that'll go back with hide and show again. That gives me a list of all my historical posted batches, and because there may be several hundred of those, we have a filter bar on the top here, so we can filter and sort those batches, posted and unposted. We also can inquire on our transactions, and this is by supplier. If I click on supplier, it gives me a drop-down list of suppliers, and all I need to do is to make a selection, and then that automatically just displays all of my transactions. We can do the same thing by product item. That now changes to item. That gives me a drop-down list with all my items. If I choose the one that we looked at the stock detail form. There's my transactions, that you might remember those quantities. And we have transaction types. Now at this point we've got our transaction type list, and I mentioned when you're creating your batches you get a drop down of all these items here. If I go into issues, that gives me a list of all my issues, either from a requisition book or to a specific job, and each of those with issue job shows the job number. And we also have an all option, and that just gives me a listing of all my transactions. We can also do it by date, and that gives me a couple of calendar controls. So I could say from the beginning of the year until today's date, and that'll automatically give me all my transactions. So you can see that I've got transfers, receipts, issues, etc. between a date range. Now we've got stock take, which is also a transaction type, and stock takes can be done at any time. Typically organizations will do an annual stock take, but you can do spot checks at any time, and you do it by bin location. So you'll do it for a stores and by a bin location. Now the way that it operates is we create a batch. I'll double click on this one, and we've created a batch. It gives it an automatic batch number. It's for that stock location, and we do it between those two bin locations. When this form initially opens, there's nothing in this feedback here. So I'll go back and I select that. So we've just created that batch. We then print a stock take list, and that gets printed as a hard copy that you go out to this particular stores, and in this stock level column here you write down the actual values that are found. They are then totaled on there, and we then go back into here and we enter those feedback values. As we enter them, we get a running total down at the bottom here, and that total when we finished should agree with the total that's on our hard copy list. And once that's done, we confirm it. We can produce an adjustment report, and that adjustment report shows where our differences were, if any, and that gets posted as a stock type of, or a transaction type of STKE, which is a unique one for stock takes, and that's our audit for that. So at that point we've completed the overview. I did mention that we had separate videos for all of the transaction types. We also have one for stock takes and one for reports. So that concludes the overview of stock management in RMM.